Hi, welcome to this video. So, what is loss and damages in the context of climate change? Now, some of you might have heard this word called loss and damages or even loss and damage fund, particularly in the context of COP28. So, loss and damages in the context of climate change is basically the kind of losses and damages that the anthropogenic climate change cause for individuals, for countries, for communities, for institutions. For example, when there is a flood due to climate change, or when there is a hurricane, or when there is drought, or when there is heat wave, there are associated loss and damages. Now, this loss and damages are of course an economic value for the losses and damages. For example, if a country loses certain amount of land, or if a community loses certain amount of their properties, now that would have a economic value. So economists have been able to assign economic value to a lot of these losses and damages, and then they calculate them and make an estimate for the particular losses and damages out of anthropogenic climate change. Now, loss and damage framework do not account for non-economic losses. For example, how do we assign an economic or a monetary value for a loss of an individual from a family? Or how do you assign an economic value for a forest for the inhabitants who are non-humans in that? For example, animals, birds, and so on. So, the loss and damage framework that we have in the context of climate change so far is only an economic value and an estimate of economic losses and damages primarily. They do not account massive losses of nature, of emotions, of human beings, and so on. Now, what are the various losses and damages that we have had so far, and also what is the kind of amounts globally since, let's say, for a decade now, in terms of the loss and damages? Is a staggering huge amount of finance. So now, loss and damage fund was of course something that came up recently also in the COP28, where hundreds of countries came together and agreed to pay the poorer as well as the most vulnerable countries to climate change and economic compensation for the kinds of losses and damages. So here, of course, the demand for a loss and damage fund was going on for a long time in the UNFCCC processes, and that did had a progress in the two previous COPs, particularly in UK and in Egypt, and then that finally got culminated into a beginning of a global loss and damage fund at the COP28 in Dubai, to which a lot of countries have already promised a lot of finance, which would be helpful for the countries who have had huge economic losses out of climate change. This particular new research gave us a small glimpse into the kind of loss and damages. So this is a new research from the Nature Communications. So this study is titled as "The Global Cost of the Extreme Weather that are Attributable to Climate Change" by Rebecca Newman and Illinois. So this particular study that kind of looked at data from all available EEA studies, combined these data with socio-economic cost of these events, and extrapolate for missing data to arrive at an estimate of the global cost of extreme weather attributable to climate change in the last 20 years. And they find that 143 billion USD per year of the cost of the extreme events is attributable to climate change. Now, the majority of this, which is 63% of that, is due to human loss of life. Now, they also suggest that the frequently cited estimates that we get in the newspapers, in the media, or in the social media of these economic losses of climate change are arrived normally at using integrated assessment models that may be substantially underestimated, which actually means that this study, or these scientists suggests that a lot of estimates about loss and damage that we get in the media are basically very less or the very minimal accounted for, and they are not proper or exact estimate of the kind of losses that we have out of climate change events. Carbon briefs one of the article actually, which shows that people in low income countries with low emissions tend to be more exposed to climate impact, and how they have much more losses and damages. So here you see the kind of countries. You look at Malawi, look at Somalia, look at Eritrea, Niger, Mozambique, Tajikistan, Australia, Chad, Sudan, Afghanistan, Madagascar, Liberia, Burundi, US. So here you see only three countries that are high income countries, where Australia, US, and Netherlands marked, and rest of the countries are mostly poor income countries that are in either Africa or small island nations, or in the South Asia or in South America. So these are the kind of countries that have had or are more exposed to the impacts of climate change and have had highest losses and damages due to anthropogenic climate change. Now, this is also one of the reason this kind of demands came from small and island nations, most vulnerable countries in Africa, Asia, and South America in terms of loss and damage funds, where rich, historically most polluting countries do not have similar or substantial losses or damages due to climate change. Now, this is also one of the reason that this kind of funds came into being. Now, one of the most important question here is that can how far or can at all rich countries or big polluters can pay these poor countries for their 100% losses and damages? The answer is simple, that no. Now, of course, some of the finances might go to these countries, but that might not be adequate to recover from these losses and damages. And then you have ongoing climate impacts and events that are coming up regularly by year. So countries, global economies are not going to be able to sustain the kind of losses and damages. So of course the big answer here is our climate action, the global climate action and the national climate action. Of course, this has to be led by the kind of countries who have been historically highly emitting countries, and also now the current higher emission countries as well. So this has to come from this kind of countries and the global cooperations like the UNFCCC platforms and the frameworks. Now, that is the only biggest sustainable solution to come out of or to stop the kinds of losses and damages from anthropogenic climate change.